Hello and welcome all to Access Granted. This is a new venture of mine, a podcast, if you will. Um, Pretty deceiving name, not your typical run of the mill name, what this is or whatever. So, for those that don't know me, my name is Victor Ramirez, and here on Access Granted, what I am going to talk about is mental health. More importantly, or more focused on the importance of recognizing mental health, accepting it in Hispanic or in general lower income communities, because as we all know, this topic is very sensitive, not only in our world drawing more attention, but more importantly now, as we're starting to break stereotypes and stigmas within our own families and communities, I feel like now more than ever is opportune time for me to offer my experiences, my stories, and my help, if you will, um, considering that we're all going through this pandemic together, whether that may incur a greater or growing depression, for some more than others and taking it more hardly. But now I feel like would be an opportune time to offer up what I have to help those in need. If not for you, maybe a family member, maybe a friend. Um, Whether you know me or you don't know me, I feel that maybe we all, whether on social media or in person, may talk about the stigma about mental health issues, whether it be depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, anything that falls within that category. We can talk about it and say, I know this person, or my cousin has it, or I know about this person on TV. But I feel like if I'm putting my name and my face on it, somebody that you can relate to and you know is an actual person, it would give it more credibility. Is what I think it would do. Would have a larger magnitude of importance and sort of relativity for those that can relate to what I have gone through, what I am going through, and can sort of maybe draw energy, help, or any sort of progress to be made moving forward, um, with their own battle with mental illness. So with that being said, we'll get into the meat of the show. So as I said, my name is Victor. I do go by many nicknames: Vix, Vicky Moon, Vicky, etc., etc. Um, I recently graduated from Wisconsin Lutheran College, earning my bachelor's in sports and exercise science this past December, fortunately. And I'm grateful to have or to hold two very, very beautiful, important jobs that I am able to hold, luckily, through this pandemic, in which I love doing and going to every single day. A little bit of a backstory for me, I guess. So, mental health isn't just prevalent in my life, it's unfortunately affected those in my family, with my mom being affected with it, more notably my grandfather, who struggled with it most of his adult life, having it consumed his life until he passed away in 2018. But more so, it seems like it's been more central and stronger in my life, I guess. It seems very, very important. And again, as I mentioned earlier, now with the times being how they are, um, everyone is paying more attention to mental health and taking it more seriously, rather than it just being a topic of conversation or just a little side comment that could be thrown into any conversation. As for myself, my current diagnosis, I have clinical depression, which was diagnosed 10 years ago. I also have bipolar disorder, which was diagnosed 2 years ago. Anxiety comes along with that package, which was diagnosed 7 years ago, and I have been struggling with ADHD since the age of 5, which is important to note, I think, more importantly, because when I was 5 years old, it was the year 1996, and at this point, diagnosing a 5 year old, where modern medicine was at that time, was very skeptical to draw that diagnosis for a child who was, I guess, hyper and deficient of attention in my tasks and whatnot. And so being medicated from that young age and then stopped taking medication at a later age did affect or did contribute to where I am today. But I feel like that's very, very important. And I'm very, very fortunate that even though I do have these things, that I am living in the time that we are living now. Because if I were living, say, 100 years ago, probably wouldn't have the same sort of luxuries and treatments, meaning that I wouldn't have access to medications or to therapy. As I like to so frequently joke around saying that if I lived, 100 years ago and I was talking about, I feel sad, I don't want to do anything, I would be deemed crazy. And they had these radical treatments for doctors or modern medicine back then where they would cut your veins open to let the demons out of your blood or anything like that, or be burned at the stake because I think differently than those who are considered quote unquote normal. And so, as we move on from my diagnosis, moving on to a little bit more of discussion as to what this, what I plan to do or what I hope or aspire to do with this podcast, like why I set it up now, goals for this podcast, et cetera, things falling in line with that. With that being said, pretty much as I mentioned in the intro, is I want to help people. I will choose my words carefully. I know that it is my life's goal to help people in need, whether it be through my vocation at work or those who are suffering with mental illness, because I've gone through it before. It's an amazing foundation that I have to know this concrete belief that I am meant to help people. And this phrase stuck with me. My therapist told me that my life's mission or my life's goal is to help people avoid unnecessary suffering. With that said, I just want to share with you guys, if you're watching or if you're going to pass this along to anyone else, is that I just want you guys to know that this is happening in your community. It's here. You can have these issues. You can be a successful human being. Believe it or not, you can. You can overcome it. You can beat it. You're better than it. You're stronger. Trust me. I know it. It's hard. I know it is. But I just want to show you that pretty much, I guess, not a textbook definition of a quote-unquote success story here, because I'm still going through the hoops of depression and trying to rid myself of it, or deal with it, or coping with it. I just want to demonstrate that it is possible to live a normal day-to-day life in our community that isn't just on television that you see on Netflix or anything like that, or isn't a famous show or anything of that nature. But regular average Joes wake up, have this struggle, but are still able to function successfully within their communities, doing positive things. So, let's see here. So I have written down on my sticky note here to keep me on track for this show, a few talking points, excuse me. A bit of my history, I guess. So with the ADHD, as I mentioned before, I had it diagnosed at age 5, which was pretty radical at the time. And then I was, I guess, in terms, heavily medicated. Meaning pretty much in the morning, in the afternoon, or at night, excuse me, I would take medication. In the morning, it would pretty much level me out, meaning I would go from 100 to pretty much 20. And then at night, very funnily, me and my mom, or my mom likes to make fun of this all the time, is I take my medication at night, and that was part of my nightly routine. I'd take my medication and I'd always ask for a bowl of cereal. Halfway through eating my bowl of cereal, I'd be dangling my head, falling asleep, because that's what my medication was supposed to do, is level me out, I guess. So that has been a consistent issue with me in my life since the age of 5. It's been very prevalent, meaning I haven't been able. It's harder. Excuse me. Like I said, I'll choose my words carefully. It's harder for me to be able to stay on task, to pay attention, to focus on certain tasks. More importantly, school-related issues. So all throughout high school, and every single year of college, for every single class, it took almost everything within me to have to pay attention and to focus and to pass my classes, which was still very, very extremely hard, which I may have just done, within the past few years, but still, just goes to show that I still deal with it till this very day. Moving on to depression. This is the bigger one, the one that consumes my life, and or it has consumed my life. It doesn't anymore, but it's been very, very a driving force in my life, is what I should say. So this is very, very personal. Only a few people know this about myself, and this is why I think it's important, because what I'm going to share with you is proof of how vulnerable I am making myself with sharing my story with you guys. And by no means am I seeking any sort of pity or anything like that. I'm just merely sharing the facts with you as to what events led up to where I am now. So I was diagnosed with depression at 18. So that was 11 years ago. And this all began with a failed suicide attempt. I did try to take my own life in the spring semester of my senior year in high school. And after failing to take my life, I was committed into a psych ward, I guess. And I was there for a week. And after I was released, then I was only able to be released from that psych ward upon agreeing that I would be regularly seeking help from a therapist and a psychiatrist to try to combat this depression, so I wouldn't be in a position where I felt the need to take my own life again. With that being said, I now know, not now, but ever since that failed attempt, something occurred in the ER where I came to a realization, understanding, accepting that I would never, ever, ever, ever in my entire life again try to take my own life, because of how selfish it is and how much it hurts others, more importantly my mother, and not having to put her through that sort of pain and suffering, because she deserves nothing of the sorts. So at any point in time since then, I may have felt very, very depressed, very, very sad, while although I may have had the thoughts, just thinking about maybe I'm better off being dead or not being alive, I never once came to the idea of how I would take my life, because I understand that that is not the answer, nor will it ever be the answer. As cliche as it sounds, a temporary solution, a long-term solution for a temporary problem isn't the way to go about things. And I know people throw that around very often and don't dive into the importance of it or explaining what that means in the sense, but it really is true that temporary solution, that temporary problem that you're feeling at the time, where you're feeling overwhelmed and the need to take your own life and that you would be better off, that is the wrong way to go about it. And I know what it feels like to be in that spot, believe me. I know. I've been there. But it's never the answer. With that being said, I've had depression recurring in my life, and it's been prevalent ever since. So for the past 11 years, I've been living with it on a day-to-day basis. There hasn't been one day where I haven't felt the effects of the depression. So for me personally, the depression doesn't always manifest itself in mental side effects or effects, excuse me, but more or less physical symptoms. So every single day I feel drained and exhausted no matter how much I do sleep or how little I sleep, whether how good I take care of myself, eating properly and getting the right amount of exercise, I still feel exhausted and with a lack of motivation. Now, with that being said, there are still days where I do feel sad or where my emotions are more on a roller coaster and it's harder for me to stay a little more stable, um, per se, I guess. But I have been living with it and it has been prevalent in my life ever since. With that being said, where I am now, I guess 11 years later, here we are. We can tell that there's a great gap between my journey from where it started, from where I tried to take my own life, ending up in the ER, and then going to a psych ward, to now publicizing a podcast, sharing my experiences, my stories with you guys. Here I am. So, obviously, I'm in a very, 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 very better state than where I was initially when my battle began. As far as my current emotional health, excuse me, right now, I feel amazing. Cannot lie. I feel great. It is Sunday. It is 7 o'clock at night. I get to go to sleep in about 3 or 4 hours, give or take, because I got to go wake up, thankfully, bright and early at 5 a.m. tomorrow so I can go to my lovely job, which I love so much, where I can affect so many lives in a positive manner. Um, so there's that. So today, perfectly amazing, loving it. So current remedies that I can share with you. So for me, the number one thing is the combination, because I have been very fortunate enough to be in a situation where I've had access to um, healthcare insurance, and I know not everyone is in that same boat with me. But for me, I've had access to medication and therapy for years, and I am a very, 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 very strong believer that with the right combination of medication and therapy, so that means a balance between your therapist, psychologist, and your psychiatrist, that is the best way you can combat this, bar none. That is going to be your number one route or escape plan for leaving this all behind. And I understand that not everybody as fortunate as I am to have access to these benefits. But for me currently, I am still on a day-to-day basis taking prescribed medications to help me function properly, and I do still see and meet virtually, of course, because of the pandemic, with my therapist on a frequent basis and talking about my emotions, where I am, thoughts like that. It's just for the past 11 years, that's what I've been doing, and that's what is working for me. So I can only speak from my experiences, and so I know that the journey for proper medication in itself is a monstrous, ugly thing, because you're on a certain medication for a while. Maybe you're on a different dosage, then you're on different medications and stuff like that. And I understand that the side effects are ugly. But in the end, the science isn't perfect. We're not at that point in modern science, I guess, where we can just where it can be prescribed the perfect amount and the perfect medication that fits your biology, and then you can be cured instantly. So I understand that struggle as well, changing, flip-flopping from medications. But here I am finally with what seems to be the perfect concoction of two medications, one being an antidepressant and the other being a stimulant. And again, as I said, the mind is an amazing thing. the difference that you feel before you see a therapist and after, or even just talking to someone and getting a fresh perspective and being able to reframe your mindset and your thoughts is invaluable. There's not a price you can put on it. I mean, literally, you can put a price on it. Gotta love the for-profit healthcare system here in the U.S. But when, for me personally, before I talk to my therapist and after, the difference in weight that I feel lifted off my shoulders and off my mind is indescribable. So talking with someone, whether it is a therapist or someone that you can confide in and trust in, is going to help you. It's going to go a long way, trust me. Um, and then I also am very, very happy to be able to share this. Um, Being that I am seeking, or I was seeking, alternative or any other sort of methods, treatments to help aid me in my fight against depression, I stumbled across the alternative treatment called TMS. TMS is a short acronym that stands for transcranial magnetic stimulation. So it's not shock therapy. It's not anything invasive. It's nothing of the sorts. All it is the treatment which uses a giant magnet. It is pointed at your prefrontal cortex here, that is responsible for the feel-good hormones or your happy hormones, whatever you may be call it, and it sends magnetic pulses without drilling a hole in your head or anything like that. The machine is here, pointed directly at your prefrontal cortex, and it's, in simplest terms, it's like going to the gym for that part of your brain that helps you feel happy and whatnot. So the goal of that treatment or of that alternative method is to have that part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, pretty much gain muscle memory from that magnetic stimulation to produce those endorphins to make you feel better, and through those treatments. So I recently just completed 35 sessions of TMS, and the difference that I feel before starting it and after is beyond amazing. And just plain simply, like I said, my biggest issue with depression is the physical symptoms. The amount of energy and just motivation that I have every single day now is ridiculous. It's so, I cannot say enough good things about TMS. So for myself, I'm very, very fortunate to be able to have the chance to experience that and have gone through it. So those three things pretty much are what I have used, still use currently as current remedies to help combat this monstrosity that is depression. With that being said, just want to give a few recommendations for anybody that does stumble across this, who happens to take the time out of their day to watch this podcast, is don't feel ashamed. Don't feel like what you're feeling is wrong. No one can tell you how to feel. How you feel is perfectly fine. It is okay to not be okay. As cliche as that is, the hashtag, it's okay to not be okay. It truly is. We're human beings. We're living in a modern society where there's so many expectations and responsibilities and so many things that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Anybody would crumble. If you put anybody from 200 years ago in our society today, they wouldn't live with it. They would not be able to function in our society as they did back then in their own time. So it is okay to not feel your best or feel okay all the time. It is perfectly fine. What isn't okay is to hide it and to not deal with it. So this is the main point in my podcast, is trying to break this stigma. It is hard to come out and say, yes, I have depression, because you're not depressed. You're you. I'm not depressed. I'm Victor. I feel depressed. I have depression. Right? Depression doesn't exemplify who you are. You're not summed up in this one word. You're you. You're unique. You're one of a kind. Okay? Hiding it does nothing but intensify and multiply the ramifications that this monstrosity can have on you. So the worst thing you can do is say, "Oh, I'll just put it on the back burner. I got it. I got other things to do. Whatever." No, you don't want to do that. I understand we live in a world where other things need to come first, aka whether you're dedicated to working, or you're going to school and working, or you're a parent, or you're a student, or whatever your responsibilities be. You cannot neglect this thing, because it will gnaw away at you. It will eat you alive, your mental stability and your feelings and your emotions and your ability to connect with other human beings. And that is the last thing you want, because at the end of the day, you want to feel good about yourself. You want to be able to affect people in a positive manner. So, with that being said, I will be continuing to publicize more podcasts surrounding, mental health, pretty much sharing specific stories, specific strategies to go about things, keeping in mind, again, I'm only sharing my experiences. In no way, shape, or form am I a certified therapist, licensed therapist, or anything like that, or am I a substitute for an actual therapist, psychologist. I am just going to continue to share my stories as to what has helped me either learn new things or view my life from a different mindset is what I'm going to do. Now, with that being said, if anybody who is watching this is compelled or just feels the need to either share their story or share a certain problem that they're having, maybe have a question, anything like that, I am more than happy to have people on the podcast so that we can talk about this not face to face, but we can talk about these issues. Again, bringing more light to this ugly stigma that we have in our community, that mental health is just goofy and it's lazy, and then you're just not sad. Just buck it up. You're okay. You'll live. Just stop being sad. My God. Right. I'm. That's what I would like. Whether you want to do it publicly with your name, because I understand that this is a very, very hard thing to do. Putting yourself in the spotlight, not only yourself but then your family. If you don't feel comfortable enough with that, we can more than accommodate you in giving you an anonymity, and hiding your name and whatnot, but still sharing your story, because you are still important and your struggle is still very, very important. You may never know who you will affect in a positive manner. You may think it's nothing, but in reality, it is something greater. So, with that being said, this podcast will go up on its own Twitch page. Excuse me, I only did this through my personal Twitch page, being that I was lazy in creating a Twitch page for the podcast, so I apologize for on my behalf. But what I will be doing as well is uploading this podcast to YouTube, and I will see if I did this correctly in recording just the audio so that I can upload it to all the platforms where you may get your podcast from, so you don't have to look at my face if you don't want to. So you can probably just listen to this while you go about your day and whatnot. The podcast does have a email address that you can send your stories to or contact me at. It is access granted, P as in Pablo, C as in Carter, at gmail.com. There's also a Twitter page for the podcast as well, so you can send DMs on there as well. It is access granted, PC is the @ or the handle for the podcast. With that being said, just want to remind every single one of you that you are loved, you are special, and you are never alone. Whether we know each other, whether we don't know each other, whether you just need somebody to hear you out, whether you want to take your mind off things, whether you do want to talk about it, I personally am here 24/7. I don't want you to think that you're ever alone, because I know what that feels like, and I don't ever want anybody to feel that way. I want to spare everybody of that ugly monstrosity of a feeling. So, if not me, I know you have friends who care about you deeply and care about your well-being. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. I hope to see you next time.